Welcome to the factory floor. It's good to have you here. I am PA Philip Andrew Myers, and as much as FA was indeed the talker in the family, I quite was not. I was quite happy not being out and about and handling the business interests and the sales. I actually was quite happy with work on the farm and in the factory, and so I stayed out in Rouseburg at the farm a bit longer than Frank did. I had taken quite an interest in the farm work, although, if truth be told, my great interest was improving on how that farm work was done. One of my favorite accomplishments, even as a young teenager, I had figured out how, with a very basic gear, to in fact attach a cow to the butter churn, so that the cow, by walking around in circles, would churn the butter, and I didn't have to, stand there plunging away or sit there plunging away. Opening and closing the gates to the pastures. I figured out a very rudimentary system also, where with just a pulley and a rope from quite a distance, one could open and close the farm gates and not have to worry with that basic chore. And so I was quite content working with Father in the forge and in the mechanical industries that we were undertaking there at the farm. I had begun working on ways to pump and move water, actually, as a teenager. Frank mentioned the force pump that I patented in 1879. In fact, I had the basic design for that pump and a fairly good working model done when I was 17 years of age, before I ever had graduated from Smithfield Academy. I really was quite far along in my interest and in my ability, as is ever the case. When people have that ability to create, they tend to go far. That is something that's been a root of American life, and it was certainly true in the Myers family. Well, Frank did approach me finally in 1870. His business was taking off. He invited me to join. He was doing well as a salesman, making a couple of $100s a month at that point, so he offered me 20. But brothers, and we were best friends our entire life. That was never an interest, but it was quite an opportunity for a young man, and so 4 years his junior, I came a year behind him to the big metropolis of Ashland, and took up work in the shop on Center Street. Had a lovely little room in the basement where I continued to work on my inventions, and so that took us from 1870 up until 1879, which really was a really major turning point for all of us. That was the year that we took the first patent. We were holding 5 patents within that first year of moving into that arena. It was an important time. Also in that same year, 1879, I was blessed with my first wife, Samantha Case, an Ashland girl, joined me in marriage. 2 years later, we would have our children, Guy and Grace, twins. It was quite a wonderful time in the family, and so we settled into family life, to our inventions, and with Frank's leadership in business acumen, to growing the company. One of the we talk a lot about pumps. You're sort of surrounded by them here in the plant, but I do want to point out another one of our inventions. This. Who knows what this is? You know what this is? This is a bicycle rack. This is a bicycle rack. F.E. Myers and Brothers is the world's largest manufacturer of bicycle racks. We had the national contract for this new operation, Western Union Telegraph, and every telegraph office in the continental United States had bicycle racks for the messenger boys to park their bicycles so that they could park them and take off. And so our reach and our interests were into many of these kinds of useful sorts of appliances and devices. I really came up with lots of other ideas. Probably could have, owned the world at this point. But I'd draw something out and I'd say to Frank, is this useful on a farm? And if Frank said no, we threw it away. We stuck to our business. This was a rural county. The soul of Ashland County was the farming operations, and those were the people we were trying to help. And so we had a very tight focus to our business operations. Well, as our financial stocks improved, we also, Samantha and I, determined to build a new home. We built a lovely Italianate home down on the corner of Walnut Street and Center Street, home that still stands today. Later, family member would donate that to the founding of Trinity Lutheran Church, where it is an attached property in your day and age. But again, to get ahead of the story, we had begun construction on that home, and so in 1888, we were visiting the construction site. It was a tragedy in the family, one of many over those decades at that period of time. But the children were playing in the scaffolding, and Grace fell from the scaffolding into the basement and was severely injured. She would live another 10 months before she died from her injuries and from illness, from damage to her lungs. It was a stunning loss in the family, and it cemented us to Ashland and to the community because of our connections, because of now Grace in the cemetery in Ashland. And so we continued to move forward. Frank traveling, Frank on the road around the world. I had no interest in that, really. My interest was this town. And so I committed and stayed here. I involved myself in the affairs of the community. Frank mentioned our woodworking shops burning twice, quite a conflagration of disaster. But after that first fire, I realized we needed a better system for fighting fires, and I created a pump that would fit and be useful for the fire department to use. In fact, it became one of the first philanthropic commitments of the Myers family to Ashland as we saw the construction of the first major fire department in downtown Ashland at our expense. And I became the second fire chief for the volunteer fire department of the city of Ashland. I served for 30 years as the fire chief here in town. And so it was an interesting time in the life and growth of our town. We saw the city swell from 2,600 people to about 5,000 people by the 1920s, and in 1923 when Frank passed away. And we saw a continued growth in the commitment of the Myers family and businesses to seeing the town grow. We helped with the process of brick paving of many of the downtown streets, for example. In 1905, quite a wonderful period in the spiritual life of Ashland. We had been overrun, quite honestly, with liquor. Many of you know that before we built our first church here in Ashland, we had 3 whiskey distilleries on Main Street, but by 1905 we had 17 saloons, bars, or taverns right in the main downtown area. It was quite a hazard in the evenings, but We had a traveling revivalist come through Ashland. That particular few-year period, the revivalist movement in the North and Midwest United States saw tent revivals in small communities. We had for 1 month a tent meeting here in Ashland. Many souls were saved, and the community committed and held a special election. And the city went dry in 1905, and all 17 of those bars were closed immediately, leaving many young men with plenty of time on their hands and no way to exercise and to occupy themselves. And so at the close of that revival meeting, they took an offering. And I said to Frank, we need to do something here for this community and for those young men. And so we contributed. We topped off the offering at $12,500 in 1905. And the Myers family donated an 8-acre city block. And with that offering, we constructed the YMCA here in Ashland. And that became a center for the teaching and the activities for our young adults in the community and our children in the community. And that organization continues to exist and move forward. We began to take interest in and ultimately did fund a large commitment to create a hospital, what became Samaritan Hospital here, just up the street from our house. And that also is an entity that continues to work and bless Ashland as a community. Well, by 1910, we're all very, very busy. My son Guy is taking on continued leadership in the company. We have indeed become the largest pump manufacturer in the world. We are shipping from Ashland to 17 ports in the United States, and from those 17 ports to every developed country around the world. Myers Pumps working in South Africa in the gold mines, Myers Pumps in New Zealand and Australia and all of Europe. And all across, of course, the United States as a continent here. That name was in many, many homes across this great land and around the world. We were recognized repeatedly, 5 blue ribbons in the Ohio State Fair. And so by 1923, when Frank passes, and I take over as president of F.E. Myers and Brothers, we are approaching 100 patents. We're manufacturing hundreds of pumps and other kinds of equipment. And this becomes an era of great growth moving forward. And then in 23 as well, not only Frank's passing, but my wife passed away, leaving me alone with Guy. And I remained alone until 1928. And in 1928, I took my second wife. I was blessed again to have a lovely woman, a talented musician. Josephine Fayette comes from Cleveland, famous around the country for her gifted vocals and her piano stylings. And she marries me. 2 years later, we have a young daughter, Phyllis. In the house here today, you'll find photographs of all of these folks, and little Phyllis, just a beautiful little child. And so, and that's 1928. We begin to plan and enjoy our life. Part of that was company picnics. And family get-togethers. You'll see pictures in the house. This kind of family connection was important to the Myers. You see many multi-generation photographs in the building today. It was important for the company. We would have company picnics. There are people still living in Ashland today. Your day, not mine. Still in modern era, there are some older folks that remember getting on the train in downtown Ashland and riding up to Chippewa Lake for the company picnic. As a matter of fact, one gentleman relayed a story of loading Josephine's piano onto the train because she loved to entertain the audiences at the picnic. And so they would load the piano onto the train, take it up to Chippewa Lake, unload it where she would perform, and then bring that same piano back to town. It was quite a production. Well, 1932, last story, then I'll show you one more thing. In 1932, Philip Andrew Myers is killed in an automobile accident, and that brought to the end his life and his connection to the company and to the community. He was remembered fondly by many, many people at his passing. There is to this day a very large monument on a gravestone to P.A. Myers in the Ashland Cemetery. He is not buried in his grave in Ashland Cemetery. Josephine, his wife from Cleveland, had his body moved to Cleveland, to the cemetery there with her family. And so P.A. Myers' grave in Ashland is in fact empty. But it's a lovely grave. It's Myers-esque, you know. It's one of the nice ones out there. Anyway, people ask, you know, what was the big deal about the pump? And this is the last bit of the story I'll tell you. All of these pumps that you're looking at, in case you're interested, you know, these are sitting on top of the ground. There's a pipe that goes down into the ground and cylinder at the bottom of that pipe. And at the bottom of that cylinder is this little thing here, right? It screws onto the bottom of the cylinder. Right? And there's a seat in this shaft, and prior to this little Dumaflitchi, right, made of glass, the seat in the bottom of this cylinder was made of brass. Now, we continued to manufacture brass cylinders way on up into the 1900s, but this glass seat is what made, well, frankly, Ashland, Ohio, and the Myerses. This was an incredible leap forward in technology. You understand the Myerses are not the only ones patenting pump technology. In 1879, when I patented my double-action force pump, there were 200 patents given for pumps that year, right? But this made a difference, right? This sat in the bottom, and unlike those brass seats that would corrode from submersion in water, from the sand that would grate over the metal, this glass was able to withstand the pressure and without the degradation that the brass would have. And so this put us way ahead of our competition. And when we patented this changed the future. This little glass seat. We made these also. Matter of fact, I figured out not only how to design this thing, but I figured out how to build the machine to make these things. And we made them and polished them right here in Ashland, and it changed everything for us, quite honestly. Interestingly enough, you know, we were creating it ourselves. Well, I was, I suppose. And directly inventing, manufacturing, making our things. Frank, you know, he's out and about all of Ohio. He's seeing these plants. And we were having things made by other people and then sent here, and we'd put them together. I said to Frank, this was my idea, Frank, we are paying our profits to these manufacturers to make these things for us. We need to just bring all that right here to Ashland and make it ourselves. So it was actually my idea to get into the manufacturing side of this and not the assembly part. Now, the other people tried to stay with the assembly part. So right after I patented this thing, some of you have met Dr. Cowan, a contemporary of mine here in Ashland. Cowan got together with the Beers brothers, known mostly for manufacturing butter churns, and they decided to get into the pump game. And so they started having some other folks make pump parts and ship them here, and they were going to take us on. They lasted 6 months. It goes to show if you can design it yourself, you have a leg up on things. And so this was the thing that made us at that day in town. Well, this is the life of P.A. Myers, a man Not the gifted speaker and salesman that his brother was, but the man who did the inventing, the man who stayed home in Ashland and set out to change Ashland as a town for the better. And he did that as surely as he built a company.